Good morning. Welcome to IoT North Food for Thought. I'm Paul Wealls. How you doing? We did have a couple of professional athletes lined up for this morning for a chat. Sadly, Elliot's daughter has been taken into hospital. So Elliot really hopes she's okay and makes a quick recovery. And we've got Marcel. We're not quite sure where he is, so hopefully he'll join us at some point soon. We've got James. Hi, James. How are you doing?
Good morning.
Good morning. So, James, you're from Sports Pro Care. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Sports Pro Care is a business established just sort of less than a year ago. It was established during lockdown and is a sports management and welfare agency. So we look after elite athletes across a range of sports. And it's really sort of looking after everything outside of the sport, the financial aspect, the mental well-being, goal setting. There's a whole host of different things that we do in terms of branding, sponsorship, driving revenue for the athletes, supporting them and the families. We do quite a bit.
Excellent. So how did you come about starting that up?
Yeah, so Sports Pro Care, like I said, it was, I think it's coming up to, it'll be a year, July, I think. And that really was born out of the first lockdown. It was a time where I had to self-reflect, and it was just sort of, from a personal perspective, what's always driven me is passion. I was a field professional sportsman. That was always my dream from growing up, was to be a professional athlete. It was football or golf. I was naturally more gifted at golf. Got to the age of 16 and had to pick one or the other. I chose football because that's the one I was slightly more passionate about. The height of which I was on trial at Newcastle for a period. It just didn't make it. I remember the day I was released and coming home and crying all the way back home. Felt like the world crashed down, and that was the only thing. And it just it hit me at different periods in life, I suppose, but it hit me quite a lot during lockdown, where I had time to sort of reflect. I had a career, I'd quite successful. I left uni, went into teaching, sport and exercise science at Sunderland College. I was, doing FE, HE level stuff, but it didn't make me jump out of bed. It wasn't something I had a passion in. I then went into sport development, which I really quite liked, but it was the role was quite restrictive. And then I left and went into a big fitness business, and I was there for 4 years, and that was sort of a real big learning curve in the world of business. But nothing truly made me happy, and that was when it came to the first lockdown. I thought, now's the time to sort of think, where do I want to be? And it just came to me. Really just came to me and thought, I'm lying to myself, because where I've always wanted to be, where I'm always comfortable, is professional sport. And it sort of came round in a circle. So then I just sat with a pen and paper and just thought, right, what strengths do I have? Where do I feel I can add some value to athletes? And started putting the idea out there. And very quickly I found there was a big gap in the market, because athletes weren't being supported. There's some very good people out there, but there's a lot of people who talk a very good game, but it's an industry where money talks and people go into it for money. I went into it really to make an impact. And obviously as a business, yes, it needs to make money. So I thought, let's test the water, and I was just really surprised by sort of the athletes that were coming forward, the athletes that I've been able to work with, athletes that I've spoken to, and it's just given me sort of the strength to really continue and to support athletes in whichever way I can, and doing it from the heart, really, not just for the money.
That's absolutely brilliant. So the conversation we were going to have with a couple of people that were on your Rolodex, Marcel and Elliot, who, as I mentioned, sadly can't join us today. We were going to have a chat with them about how they prepare for competition. As a previous athlete, and how did you prepare? Because there's always that goal of focusing on the win, but then you've also become cognizant of the failure. So it'd be great to understand how you prepared for the success.
Yeah, I think from me, from a personal perspective, it was always something sort of within, really, which I've carried throughout life, where I always want to be the best I can possibly be. and that was just something sort of within that it's hard to explain that. And that's where the reflection in terms of setting the business up came from. Is I'm someone who's driven by a passion. Money doesn't really drive me, and that was the same with football. I never ever seen football as a job. It was a passion. It was a love. The same with golf. I would wake up in the morning. I had this hunger to play. I had this hunger to get better, and it was really quite weird because people would often, sort of ask that question, and it was tough because, especially with individual sports, say like golf, but if I played really well, I was desperate to get back onto the course. Yeah. If I played really badly, I was desperate to get back onto the course. There was never a time where I wanted to switch off. If I played really well, it was like, right, I want to get back on. Can I do better now? And it would give that confidence. If you played bad, it was sort of something that would eat away. And you think, right, I need to get that out of my system. I need to get back on the course or back on the football pitch and do something, really good. But I always want to be the best I could be. Simple as that. So it was practicing a lot every single day, training a lot, spending many hours just doing different things, looking at the game, watching videos of people, watching all the professional sports and seeing what they do, and sort of everything really. And the one thing I suppose I didn't do, which is obviously more prevalent now, is really consciously focus on the mental side of things. It wasn't something that was really spoken about when I was sort of 13, 14, up the age of 16. It wasn't something about mental preparation. I mean, it was a smaller topic, but it wasn't something I truly prepared for. It was more about the, sort of the physical aspect, the skill aspect of the sport and practicing and competing. And it was tough. It was tough. I was somebody who, especially when I was younger, didn't take defeat well. And the older I've got, the more sort of pragmatic I've become about that, and being able to sort of digest a little bit better and realise it's part of life and taking lessons away from it. But when I was young, I was really sort of found it tough to get over that. It really sort of lasted for days until I was able to get back out and compete or play again to sort of get that out of the system. And nobody really sat down and tried to do anything. And that's what I do now really with all the sort of athletes I work with, is when things are going well, there's not a great deal you can sort of do unless somebody's, losing sight of where they need to be. But a lot of it's managing defeat. Because, sports really quite funny one like that, where you're experiencing the highs and lows almost on a daily basis for many athletes. And more often than not, it's defeat for many sports, unless you sort of really at the top end of a sport. And even then, you're still experiencing the defeat. For more often than not, you have to be able to sort of bounce back for that. And that's where the mental aspect comes in. And that was part of the business for me as well, was I don't really need to teach, say, Elliot Slessor, who's going to be on a snooker player who can make 147 breaks. He's beaten Ronnie O'Sullivan. I don't need to tell him how to play snooker. But what interferes with his snooker is defeat. It's the worries outside of it. It's the mental side of things really, where that interferes with how he competes. And I think it's the same with anything. Marcel would have been the same with boxing. Often it's the things outside of sport. It's those worries that then cloud your judgment and your ability when you're actually competing.
Yeah, I mean it's so. I mean, it's one of the things that Ronnie O'Sullivan said in an interview that I read over the past couple of weeks about his last game with Elliot. Was about it's not necessarily the skill sometimes playing there. It's about the mindset. And he mentioned that he saw the change in mindset with Elliot. So at the beginning, he thought, "Oh, he's going to have me again," and then he just kept on playing his game. And he was like, "Actually," and so there was a wobble, and Ronnie won. So then when they do win and they start to soak up that success, and we see it sometimes in the press with athletes and sportsmen and such like that. There starts to be seen this bit of air of arrogance. How do you think they can stay humble with it? And I mean, I'm going to create the link here with business and IoT, being IoT North, that, there are businesses out there that are succeeding extraordinarily well with IoT, and there's other businesses that are still trying to prove their case. And there's an awful lot of slideware out there showing what people could have if they get the support from a customer to make the investment to move forward. But when those businesses make success and those salespeople make success and such like, how do we stay humble to be able to relate with more people?
Yeah, well, that's a tough one, really. I think that it's probably twofold for me. I think number one, which is where I try to come in, is the individual and having a support network around them. I think that's important for any athlete that I work with. Is having that support network around, and even when I've been in business, it's exactly the same, because you know yourself, Paul, and I'm sure many people sort of listening are exactly the same. That when money's there, everybody's your best friend. Everybody wants to be around. Everybody wants a piece of the cake, and it's when times get really tough that you realise who's genuinely there. And if there's been anything I think positive that's came out of COVID and the lockdown, is I think most people will have realised who the friends are, who are genuinely there for them, who cares for them. And it's shown a lot of people to be how selfish they can be and how self-indulgent. And I've had so many conversations with people where they turn around saying, I've not heard from such and such, I've not heard from them. I say, yeah, times are tough. And I had a great football coach, and it always sticks with me years ago. And he always said that, you can always judge somebody's character in defeat. Yeah. And he would always talk about that. And he said, when things are going well, he said, you can always judge people's character, especially in team sport, in defeat, who are looking after themselves, who are prepared to do more for others, who's there to help. And sometimes it can be people's upbringing, and when people get money, you say that all the time, and it goes to the head and become arrogant. It's for me, it's surrounding yourself with the right people, and that's easier said than done. You need to have, and that's where a lot of athletes come to me, and they've been let down by managers, they've been let down for agents, because they go to them just thinking about money signs. They don't go to them as an individual, and that for me is very much the key thing. Is looking at somebody. It doesn't bother me if I'm talking to Bill Gates or I'm talking to somebody on the streets. They're a human being first and foremost, and the worries for many people are the same, just in a different sort of profile. If in terms of Bill Gates, he will have different worries to what everybody else has, but a lot of it will be health. There'll be a lot of different things that will happen. I'm sure he had worries about money, not in terms of his personal account, but in terms of supporting the business during COVID. It's part and parcel, but you need somebody to be around who genuinely cares. And that's where, so I come in with all of my athletes. For example, Elliot will probably tell you that he rings me straight away after every game. And more often than not, when he rings, it's a case of then trying to rationalize things. What's he done well? What's he done bad? Because sometimes with snooker, luck does play a part, because they can all clear the table. If somebody flukes a couple of balls, which he's had, and I mean, the last qualifying round before the Crucible in this year's World Championship, the lad who we played was so lucky. He rang him after the game and said, sorry, the run of the ball was most certainly on my side, but that doesn't really help Elliot. So then then it's up to me just to sort of say, listen, you're playing really well. You're coming into some form. Let's take time to digest, cool down, and then you go again. But being surrounded by the right people, that's no different whether it's sport, life, or business. And I think that's where some businesses come unstuck, is they're surrounded by people who aren't really there for them. They're more there for the money and living the high life. And you quickly find out when these companies fail, who scarpers and who actually sticks around to help out. And I think you've just got to, life doesn't promise anything, does it? We know, like you say, so many business people, the vast majority of business people I speak to have been rock bottom and have been top of the world. They've all experienced huge failures and huge wins. And I think that makes them then quite sort of clear-minded, and they manage things a little bit better. But you've got to have that support network around you.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, just touching on one of the things that you mentioned there about, through COVID, and, like people saying, I haven't heard from such and such. It's like, well, it works both ways. You need to connect with people as well as them connect with you, and just being cognizant of that. I think one of the things that you mentioned there as well, that sort of raises quite an interesting thing, is that, people's views and self-justification on scenarios as well. When you're trying to help somebody and coach somebody and they may take it the wrong way, then it can have a bit of a detrimental effect on the relationship. Rather than being open and talking about it, we sort of create that presumption of, oh, my belief is right on what was that situation, rather than if there's a bit of a grey area talking about it. We were talking about the calls there in regards to success and defeat. What kind of impact have you seen that defeat have on some of your clients?
Yeah, see, I think that's a big one. I think it has really quite a big impact, and it's magnified for them. Is what I've seen, and obviously it's been a while since I've played sport, but I've been in different businesses, failed, succeeded, whatever else. So over time, I've become a little bit better, and you sort of become a little bit more numb to it and forget what happened in the past. But for example, when I'm speaking to Elliot, he'll be the first to admit it really bothers him. It really, really bothers him, and it can take him a while to get over that, because something that may seem insignificant to me, to other people, is really magnified in their world, because that's everything to them. So in terms of Elliot, we've had big problems this season with his tips. The snooker tips, that he's had tips that have been splitting, tips that haven't been playing the way they are. And it might sound really insignificant to other people, but it makes a huge difference to professional snooker play, because it's my belief snooker's the hardest sport out there, bar none. Because of the skill level and the accuracy, there's no room for error. So a tip, if you are literally talking about millimeters in terms of shot position and everything else. So if the tip's too hard, too soft, if it misshapes, if it splits, and that got into his head all season, because he couldn't keep control of the cue ball. He was getting beat. And then when he gets beat, obviously he comes away, because I don't know if many people know, but especially in snooker, if you don't win games, you don't get paid. There's no salary, there's no anything else. As a snooker player, if you don't win a match, you come home with no money. And it's only as the competition sort of goes through, and also the relevance of the money is that's what classes as the ranking points. So again, if you're not winning money, then you're not getting ranking points, and therefore you can fall off the tour. And so it's a constant battle, and it's the same with any other sport where they really take it hard. I mean, Robbie Davis Jr., who's a client of mine as well, boxer, he fought during COVID, and got beat, and he's had a really tough time. He's left his training camp that he was in, and because he's thinking, will I get another shot, because he's in his early 30s now, and he's been British champion. And I think you then get a lot of thoughts coming around, thinking, well, 2 seconds, if I do retire now, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? This is all I've ever known, and it's scary. And that's where, again, I try to come into support, just to try and rationalize things and listen to them. Sometimes it's just a case of listening. I don't need to do anything more. But I mean, in my career, it's always helped to speak to people who've been through something similar. And say, actually, I've been there and I've come out of it the other side. And sometimes that's just enough to say, yeah, everything's going to be okay. But it most certainly magnifies everything as an athlete. And
so how do you help them learn from those experiences, the negatives as well as the successes? Relating it back to business. We with products, with sales. With marketing, we learn from the information and experience that we're going through. Some are more data driven than others, and there's an awful lot of tools out there that are tracking and tracing the performance of athletes more and more and more. So how do athletes take that information, either personally from people like yourself or from the data that they can get that's been recorded? How do they sit back and learn from the failures, and also recognize how they did well for their successes?
Yeah, so again, I think it's a bit of a mix. I mean, I'm a big believer, whether it be business, and this was something I learned massively from personal experience, was taking that little bit time just to digest, allow emotions to digest, because people react in haste when things maybe go well, and you're angry and you're not seeing things clearly. And that's what I always say to them, if they're feeling that way, is let's chat tomorrow. We talk about it now, but just let your emotions calm down, and we'll revisit it tomorrow. But a prime example of that, where in the case of Elliot, again, where he all season had struggled COVID didn't help. I mean, he was sent home from the first tournament because he came in contact with another player who had COVID through no fault of his own. So he lost ranking points. He came home with no money. He was out of pocket because he paid for the hotel and travelled down. And then that sort of just set the season really in terms of then tips and everything else. Mm-hmm. Sitting in hotel rooms by yourself, which wasn't healthy for anybody. But what he ended up doing at the end of the season, it was something that I noticed, and he went back to his coach, is he actually started looking at some of his videos, because he wasn't playing badly. He was lacking a lot of confidence. So he was getting in amongst the balls, trying to, score heavy. He would break down. He would allow his opponent back in. It then became scrappy, and he was, coming away, getting beaten final frame deciders. And you're talking about a lad who is, ringing me up every single day, saying how well he's been playing, knocking in 147s, not missing balls, and he goes and plays. And it was entirely different. And he looked back at his videos, and he rang me one day and he said, he went, I've watched my videos. And he said, you know what I've noticed? And I said, I've got a feeling it's what I mentioned to you last week. And he said, I've changed my game. He said, I'm so negative. He said, it's only when I've watched back the matches that I've realised how badly I've been playing. He said, because he went, my game is, very much like a Judd Trump. He said that where it's spotting an opportunity, splitting the balls open at the earliest opportunity, and then potting them, clearing up the table. And he said, I've been trying to be too precise. He said, it's never been my game. He said, it's only when I've had the chance to reflect and look back at it. And that's what we sort of then focused on for the remainder of the season, because this was sort of a few tournaments before the end. And every time he went out to play, I said, let's just remember, you've been getting beat, being in your shell. Let's be confident, because what's the worst that's going to happen? You're going to get beat. Well, you've already been doing that. So at least if you're going to get beat, do it your way. And the back end of the season, he was brilliant. He was brilliant because he was playing in that mindset. He recognised that he wasn't being himself, but was fortunate that he had a team around him who was sort of prompting him really to go back and have a look at those things. And going back to business, that's exactly the same, like you're saying there about products. Sometimes you have great ideas and it doesn't work. Sometimes you think ideas, aren't that great, but actually do work. And it's important to have those people around who can actually be sort of give you that constructive criticism and actually say, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And I do that day in, day out now with my business, very much so, is getting people to ask questions that may be even difficult. Asking me questions about certain things, because that makes me think about things that I've potentially not seen. Everybody sees different things. Everybody thinks differently. And sometimes you can think that you know it all, but you don't. You just really don't. And I think that's a mistake you see often in, businesses and in sport, where they think they know everything, don't listen to people, and then, they become unstuck at some point, and then they're desperate for help. And, it's so important to listen to other people around. Then it doesn't have to be, people who are above you. It's it's the story, isn't it, about Richard Branson. He goes around with his little notepad, and he goes on the planes and he asks staff, and he says some of the best ideas he's had at Virgin have come from going around asking people on planes and staff and everything else, because they're the ones who are seeing the business on the ground, the things that make a difference, and you've got to listen to people.
I think the key takeaway from that is about taking that time out to reflect and take that information and ask for feedback from people to learn from it. And I think sometimes we run so fast with everything that we sort of forget to take that time to reflect. And you don't have to be sat at the desk for that reflection. Sometimes the best type of reflection is to get out there and go for a walk and talk and stuff like that as well. Hey James, we've come to an end of the end of the show now. Really appreciate you joining me, and it's been a great chat, and look forward to catching up with you soon. Thanks very much, B.
Thank you.